The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it. Let's get you into the weekend. Happy Friday. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, as we are geared up. Plenty of spring football. Big scrimmage day tomorrow for Nebraska. Some thoughts from Evan Cooper and MJ Sherman. We'll get to Jacob Padilla, going to be with us in 20 minutes. What's the landscape look like in the portal for the Big Red? And also a big get for Creighton in hour two. Bill Doleman with us, NBC Sports, the pride of Fairbury. Brady Oltmans from Hail Varsity to talk some recruiting and spring football. And Danny Burke with VSiN Sports Network, some MLB futures, and his thoughts on the Final Four. Who does he like tomorrow night? Who does he like on Monday night? I've got to give a lot of props and a shout out to my brother, way smarter than I am in so many different facets of life, but specifically in this monstrous online pool he's a part of for the NCAA tournament. He picked Miami.
No way.
He has Miami. And he's going up against a buddy that has UConn. So I'm sure the text chain will be vicious and personal on Saturday night between the two. But yeah, he has the U. My brother was a bit of a little practical jokester, and we've referenced the 0-1 team a few times this week with the news of Coach Solich coming back for the spring game. So my brother and I are at Hy-Vee making a chips and dip run. All right, I was buying alcohol, but anywho. but this is, 22 years ago? And my brother, to mess with people, he had this, pearl white skull cap. And a buddy of his gave it to him, or he swiped it. I don't know how he got it. But it was a Miami hat. It was a pearl white Miami stocking cap with the U, right? The green and the orange. And he's wearing it around, and he's just getting eyeballed and MF'd, and just people are almost trying to bump into him in the aisles of the grocery store. We're going to win. He just did it to see what type of reaction he'd get. I don't know what he did with that stocking hat, if he set it on fire after the first half or not. But
well, he better have kept it now for 22 years later. That thing's got to be lucky in some way, you know? The fact that you wear that hat, Miami goes on to win the game. Whenever he wears that hat, Miami seems to win.
So you're telling me he needs to call Mario Cristobal and say, let's make a deal?
I was going to say he just needs to wear it on Saturday so he can get Miami to the national championship game and, win his bracket pool. But how the hell did he pick that? Let it be known.
I don't know where he got it. He was maybe a senior in high school or a freshman at Doane. I don't know, but he jumped in the car. He's like, hey, let's go get some chips and dip. You need beer? Meaning he needed beer. And he wore the Miami hat.
Well, just let it be known. This is your life lesson, and a life lesson for anyone out there, that no matter how good you are at something, your brother will always try and succeed in one-upping you. You talk about sports for a living, and he's the one winning the bracket pool. That's the way it always goes.
He's also the one that was a freaking good athlete.
That's just not fair.
No, and he's tall. I got the hair. That's it.
That's a good consolation prize.
He's tall, and he gets to go to warm climates this time of year. So I'm jealous of him. But no, I just had to blurt out that little story of my brother repping Miami for a short time just to try and get beat up in the wine aisle 22 years ago. Let's spend a few minutes on 24/7 Sports, their story out, and this ties into an earlier story you want to get into about recruiting. What is your bread and butter for recruiting, and specifically projecting, right? 24/7 Sports National has come out with some teams they think can be top 25 by 2025. And right in there, tops on the list is Nebraska. They think by 2025, Coach Rule can have Nebraska in the top 25. This blew me away. I fancy myself to know a little more than necessary about Nebraska football history and games and records and rankings and scores, and some of that is steel trap for me. I just remember things like that, and I know that it's been 6 years. It's been well documented without a bowl appearance, but I didn't know Nebraska hasn't finished the season in the top 25 since 2012, since that Big Ten title game team. We know what happened against Wisconsin, but that is forever. They've been in the top 25. They've not hung around the top 25. They've not finished. I know the 2014 team just missed out. They went 9-4, I believe. Did
you say this is the final AP poll of the regular season or the one after the bowl games?
After the bowl.
Okay, that makes sense then. I went to that 2014 team as well because I think they were top 25 when they went off to the bowl game.
They were. They played SC, lost by 3.
Yep.
45-42. And I remember that because it was a shootout, and Nebraska just started chucking the football. All the handcuffs were off of Coach Beck. He's like, we're going to throw the damn football. And Nebraska put a good comeback together against a USC team that you want to talk about underachieving.
That's so much NFL talent.
Yeah, that team totally underachieved.
Who was the defensive lineman that they had on that team that was just wrecking Nebraska's offensive line all game long? He was a first round pick.
He was a first round pick, but he ended up getting sick and having to retire early. Mm-hmm. Not Odeziwa or something like that. I don't know. We'll look up stud USC player, defensive line, 2014, and you'll have like 15 hits show up on the internet. But when we talk about teams that could be top 25 by 2025, do you agree with that? If you're a Nebraska fan, we'll see what 2023 brings. We'll see what 2024 is about by year 3. And this is different, right? Remember the year 3 projections for Frost? Year 3 projections for Frost when he got here. Winning a conference championship, in the Big Ten championship, going to a New Year's Day 6. All of that was, well, it's going to happen. I swung and whiffed on that one. I thought Nebraska would be in a better spot by year 3 in what turned out to be 2021. So Nebraska in year 3 of Rule, top 25, you'd take that. I think you kind of expect that. I'll be honest with you. I think they could be challenging for it in 2024. I don't know what to make quite yet of 2023. I don't know how their depth's going to be. I know they're going to practice. I know they're going to develop, and I know they brought in some difference makers. How soon will they get up to speed with this new defense? You've got a new offense that you're putting in as well. You've got a lot of personnel. You've got really good returning production. You have top 40 returning production in the country. Almost 1,000-yard back. Casey Thompson returns. A lot of your offensive lines back, assuming they take the step where they're decent to good versus a liability, or at least the offense is balanced enough so they're not one-dimensional. They're not 100 and whatever in rushing. So there is some semblance of a ground game to take pressure off the passing attack. Think about that. I mean, Nebraska's returning production's around 70 to 72% offensively, and that's without Trey Palmer, right? So you got a good transfer class. You've been recruiting at a top 25 level for years. And your schedule for 2023, you have one ranked team as we talk right now. Now, I would assume Iowa's going to be a team that's ranked. I think Illinois could be a team that's ranked when Nebraska faces them. And stranger things, I don't foresee Colorado upsetting TCU on the road. But who knows if the Buffs shock the world and get a start that's 1-0. Maybe Colorado sneaks in. I don't know. That's pretty crazy to think, though. I wouldn't bet your money or mine that Colorado is 1-0 when they host Nebraska. but just one team, and that's going to be Michigan right now for the Big Red that's ranked. Michigan State, we'll see where they flirt.
Wisconsin as well, under Fickell. If they can get things right in year one, that's a top 25 team. Just based on the type of talent that he inherited, I mean, you still have Braylon Allen. You do. But and you still have a Wisconsin offensive line.
Right, and I think Fickell's smart enough to use both.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because their problem's always been quarterback. But you have talent. You're going to continue to get talent. And the thing that can be different now than what's happened in the past is I think you're going to have talent developed, which is the key. NIL is always a game changer for Nebraska. And you have that rule effect. Really good column from Tom Chattel on Solich's return. And what's old is kind of new again was a really good paragraph in Tom's column about what Rule has done, and that's reach out. What works here? Why does it work here? And that's reaching out to T.O., reaching out to Frank Solich, and also reaching out to Trav. And the trick has been, and you talk to a lot of the coaches that we loved to chat with, and that's the Darlingtons and Coach McBride's. It is all about being able to get guys practice reps and get them developed. And I think you put all of this, what I said, together, it's not unreasonable to think about being a ranked football program again. You kind of expect it, I would think, but you can do the math on this and say, all right, here's the lines you can put together to formulate at least a not half-cocked opinion.
And you mentioned that article from Tom Chattel, and there was one very telling line in it with talking about how Matt Rule has reached out and talked to T.O. and Solich and kind of getting the feel for the program, where Matt Rule asked Solich his opinion on how he would rebuild Nebraska, and he said, essentially, Matt Rule's already been hitting the checklist of what I would be doing had I taken that job. Had Nebraska offered it to me, had Trev Alberts wanted me as the head coach, he laid out his checklist of things he would accomplish in the first few months in the job, and he said Matt Rule's already been hitting all those, so that's your number one good sign. With what Frank Solich accomplished during his time at Nebraska, he gets it around here. And then, on top of that, a very, very successful head coaching stint at Ohio, which not a very easy place to coach. I know there's a lot of talent around there, but you're also going up against the who's who of college football in that region.
You're a further down the line choice.
Yes, exactly. And he turned them into a respectable to dangerous type opponent, the Ohio Bobcats. And you know what? He says, if I was coming to Nebraska, I'd be doing the same things Matt Rule is doing, which is like, in coaching terms, I feel like that's a big stamp of approval on a guy to say he's doing the same things I would do.
Well, the fact is he's reached out because he wants to get it right, and he's not intimidated. He wants the knowledge of guys who did it for decades and built it the right way. Who's on the horn with us?
Yeah, Pete on the line.
Pete, welcome back to us. How you doing?
How you doing?
Good, man. What do you say?
I guess my opinion, I think in year 2 we should be a top 25, and I think in year 3 we should be a top 10. Okay. If we're not, then we might have kind of overpaid for a coach. I mean, I don't know. Did Tom Osborne ever finish out of the top 25 in his career?
No. The worst he ever finished was 24th in 1990. That's the year they were ranked 3rd, poised for a title run. The Buffs got him, Oklahoma got him, Georgia Tech got him, 3 consecutive losses to lose.
Well, the more he listens to Tom Osborne, the more he's going to understand Nebraska, and the sooner he's going to bring Nebraska back. So I have high confidence in Matt Rule. I don't think it's going to take as long as people think. We've had the talent for years to be in the top 25, but we haven't shown it on the field.
No, fair point. Pete, thanks for the phone call. Appreciate you tuning in.
And the thing that Pete said there that really stands out is people in national media might disagree with that, oh, Nebraska, by year 3 under Matt Rule, should be a top 15 team. They look at the past decade and they say, well, there's a lot that needs to be changed around Nebraska. Nebraska's not what it once used to be. But he brings up a great point. Look at the money you're paying Matt Rule. Look at the resources you're giving Matt Rule, a brand new, sparkling new facility that's going in on top of your salary, which is one of the top 20 highest paid coaches in the country. Yeah. Based on all that, what Matt Rule has to work with and what you're paying him, Nebraska should have a top I'm not going to say top 10 by year 3, but you should have a team that can flirt with the top 15 by year 3. By then, you're bringing in your recruits. You can't look and say, well, it's the last guy where we're dealing with his. And I don't think Matt Rule's type of guy to say that. But by year 3, you can completely flip a program, and you should completely flip a program. That's whenever, you know what, you have to look at a program and say, now is the time we really start evaluating what this head coach has been doing around here. And based on the resources and what you're paying Matt Rule, top 15, I'm not going to say should be the expectation, but if you're a Husker fan, that's not an unreasonable goal to have.
I think it's his expectation. I think it's the team's expectation.
I agree. I think it's Trev's expectation.
Yeah. So
I'm not saying if he's not top 15 that it's a failure with what he's doing, but that's a realistic and reasonable goal that Husker fans should have. That by year 3, Nebraska can be maybe not finishing the year in the top 15, maybe not spending the entire year in the top 15, but go spend some time in the top 15 and just go put yourself on the national map.
His previous other stops, he has.
Yes, that's true.
By year 3, with worse starting points, he's won a conference title and played for another conference championship. And I mean, he finished top. He was in the teens, I think, and I think that Baylor team flirted with probably top 10.
Well, they were very, very close to taking down a college football playoff level Oklahoma team. I know that Oklahoma team went and got curb stomped by LSU in the college football playoff, who didn't get curb stomped by LSU that year. But great Oklahoma team, and Baylor pushed him as hard as anybody that season.
We'll spend some time with Jacob Padilla, his thoughts on spring ball. We'll get to some of your comments in the stream as well. Can email the show, chris@HaleVarsity.com. And we'll tell you how to watch the show as well. Hail Varsity continues, presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Good to spend time with Jacob Padilla. He joins us at Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. Can watch this show, this interview, Hail Varsity YouTube channel, the Hail Varsity Twitter handle at HVarsityRadio. Can send an email in, chris@HaleVarsity.com. Rule needs to win 8 to 10 this year, every year. Let's quit lowering the bar crap. Sorry, man, and I know Rule's not Riley, I know Rule's not Frost, but it's been a situation where we've jumped on, it'll be okay, easy transition. No, I think with the newness and this defense and the guys not working together previously on the defensive side, I'm going to be a little more cautious with my my brazen takes on, they'll sleepwalk to 7, they'll sleepwalk to 8.
Well, when you look at the schedule, and I'm with you, I think saying 8 is easy money that's a little crazy, but I'd be more surprised if Nebraska were to
if it happens. I just am not going to be calling my shot.
I'd go as far as say I'd be more surprised with the schedule if Nebraska were to miss a bowl game next year than to go win 9 games. I think 9 games actually is not crazy to think with the schedule. I think it would be very difficult. I think we need to remember as Husker fans that, you know what, Matt Rule's a football coach with about 9 months to get things right, not a magician. And in order to get Nebraska to that level that Husker fans want in 9 months, you need a little bit of magic on your side. But I'm not going to sit here and say it's impossible. The proper development, the right coaching, if everything clicks in the right way, we've seen it happen before with other teams. Now, a lot of things would have to fall into place in the right way, but it's not impossible to think that Matt Rule getting to 8 wins in his first year, you know?
Jacob, what say you, man? You're around the spring session, and we're so far out from a depth chart and starters and injuries and the position races and the schedule. When you hear an email that says 8 to 10, what do you think?
We're not the ones who lowered the bar. I believe that was the previous 2 coaches. So I don't think you can put that on us. We're just trying to evaluate where the program is, go off of where it's been. I think to say 8 to 10, it's a massive failure if you don't get there in year 1, coming off of what we saw the last few years. That's just crazy. Yes, they have to get back to the place where that's the standard. That's ultimately what it needs to be. Something like that, that's what the expectations are at Nebraska. But to say that's what it is with no context whatsoever, you're just setting yourself up for failure and making it more difficult on the new coaches than you need to be. That's where they need to get to. Mm-hmm. To say they have to be that immediately, especially not knowing what what health luck this team might have between now and the season, kind of what everybody else does, how things play out. Like, we don't even know exactly what the roster is going to look like, the rotation, any of that stuff. So we're a long way off from, I think, being able to evaluate how good this team might be. They got to work back to that 8 to 10 kind of standard, and I think they can get there, but we've got to see. I mean, we've been excited about things we've seen under the previous two coaching staffs, and both failed to get there outside of that one season for Riley.
Well, and Jacob, to your point, not only are we a long way from knowing how good this team could be, I think from what we've heard from the coaching staff, the coaches are a long way from knowing how good this team still can be. Yeah,
I mean, that's what Rule said this week, is like, he doesn't even want his coaches thinking about a potential depth chart or who's going to be starters here or there. At this point, it's entirely evaluation. He wants them looking at traits and like, all right, what do we think this guy might be able to do within our system, and at what position, and how do these skill sets fit together? Like, right now, they're trying to figure out what they have, where guys belong within the program, who their best players are going to be. Like, there's so many questions that they need to answer that to just blanket say any kind of make any kind of declarative statement about this team, I think is foolish.
Your take on MJ Sherman? Saw the video yesterday. He was available after post-practice, and breath of fresh air. Really cool to hear his story and the struggle to leave Georgia.
Yeah, so I hadn't really watched any of his previous interviews. I don't get too in the weeds with the recruiting and everything. So like, that was the first time that I heard from him, and I got to be honest, like, I think he was still catching his breath, to be honest. So like, when that thing started, like, his first answer was kind of a one-word answer, like how to get just like fun was his first answer, and then second answer kind of got a few more words, but like, oh boy, here we go again. Kind of somebody that's not super comfortable in front of the microphone, doesn't have a lot to say. And man, that thing turned around in a hurry, because he was fantastic. I was sitting over there for that entire thing, and he was really, really good with some of his answers. Again, kind of being vulnerable, like letting everybody know kind of where his head was at when he left Georgia after he first committed to Nebraska and got here, and still wasn't entirely sure what he had gotten himself into just yet, and reasons why he's here, and just kind of the connections that he's made with his friends back at Georgia, with the new guys here at Nebraska. Delivered some great one-liners there, just describing the defense, and obviously the $1 million friends line there. He just had a lot of, called Chief Borders his sunshine or sunlight or whatever it was. So yeah, there's a lot packed into that, about 9 minutes for Sherman in front of the microphones.
And Jacob, maybe you got a different feel, but to me, that sounds like a guy who could be the next guy in the long line of former players that end up becoming coaches under Matt Rule. I don't want to put pressure on him or try to gauge his future, but he almost felt like a coach, as you said, with some of those one-liners and some of the things he said. He seems like he's become a product of some of the very high-level coaching he's gotten in his lifetime.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know that I can say that off of one, but I mean, there are a lot of different ways, coaching, media. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I think he's going to want to have a long, productive playing career beyond Nebraska. That's ultimately the goal. Like you said, generational wealth is kind of his ultimate long-term goal. And I don't know that I don't know that you get there doing the grind of coming up as a GA and as an assistant coach and all that. Like that's probably not the path to get you there unless you hit it big and become an NFL head coach or anything. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see kind of what he does in this program and in his system. And he, like he said, the opportunity is why he was here. Like that's what Matt Rule told him on. Is like, hey, you're going to play here. He won 2 national titles with Georgia. He played in 39 games over his 3 years there. So it wasn't like he wasn't playing at all. Like he was a special teams guy and a depth guy on defense the last 2 years at least. So he was playing, but wasn't a main guy that's out there more often than not and a huge part of the defense. And that's ultimately what he wants to be and thinks he can become. And with kind of his physical traits and what this team needs, I think it's got a chance to be a pretty mutually beneficial situation here for Nebraska and MJ Sherman.
Jacob Padilla is with us from HailVarsity.com and magazine. Get the subscription, HailVarsity.com/offer, digital and print, at Jacob Padilla _. Find him on Twitter. Jacob, going to talk hoops right now. Reaction to Traudt landing at Creighton. Surprised that it was Creighton. I know he wanted to get closer to home. I know Oklahoma was a school that also impressed him, but a good get for Mac.
Yeah, not surprised at all. I mean, talk about this. It had been going on for a while. Ultimately, the close to home, that he got homesick. He's got friends here in Omaha, obviously back in Grand Island. He's got friends in Lincoln too. Like anywhere he goes, coming back here, he'll have connections there that'll just make life more enjoyable for him. And it just sounded like it was bit of a grind out there, obviously going through a redshirt year, which was his choice, but that's not easy. And then it's the first time away from your friends and family, not knowing any of those guys out there. Obviously had a connection with Isaac McNeely through the recruiting process, and obviously teammates there, I'm sure became good friends with and all that, but just a different kind of situation. And right now, like, he's a guy that wants to be part of a winning program, and his pedigree says he can be. And obviously initially committed to Virginia, coming off their national title a couple of years ago, and now coming back to Creighton, coming off an Elite Eight run. And he was a great fit. I think took a long, hard look at Creighton the first time. I think he never really announced a finalist, but I think it was kind of a group of five, and Creighton was right in the mix there, behind Virginia. So he maintained the relationships there with the coaches. I'm sure kind of followed along with how this season went, how they went in the postseason, and sees himself as a really good fit to the way they play.
Was Nebraska ever a consideration?
It just seems like with where Creighton and Nebraska are as programs, he didn't take any visits because he had already seen both Creighton and Nebraska. When he decided to leave, it was Creighton or Nebraska. Like he wanted to come to the home state, and wasn't going to drop down to the Summit League. Sure. It was Creighton or Nebraska, and I don't know at what point he made up his decision in terms of like, this is where I want to go. I know he made the official commitment on Wednesday, but yeah, I just, again, kind of seeing what he said about it, it's just. It's hard to compete with a team that just made an Elite Eight run and has a chance to be really good again next year versus a team that just went 500. And he said very complimentary things of Fred Hoiberg in the program. Said the program's getting better, they're on an upward trajectory, but at this time, like, Creighton just offered more of what he was looking for than Nebraska did.
Jacob, quickly, and we might have to do another segment to get your thoughts on the Final Four, but do you think, and obviously it's a long way off, but do you think that Isaac Traut's a guy that could slot seamlessly into a starting lineup for Creighton as it stands right now?
Yeah, we'll have to see kind of who comes back or not. Like if Arthur Kaluma and Baylor Scheibman both return, those guys are in the starting lineup, probably not much room for him. If, say, Kaluma were to make the leap to the NBA, now that starting four spot is up for grabs, and you've got Isaac, you've got Mason Miller, and Jason Green as kind of the three guys on the program right now that will compete for that spot. So coming off a year of strength and conditioning, adding weight onto his frame, continuing to get shots up to keep that jumper sharp. He'll have, I'll say this, I think he's a very good bet to have a strong contributing role for this team, and what that role is depends on who comes back.
Jacob, give us a couple minutes on the other side. That work okay for you?
Yep.
All right, good stuff. Jacob Padilla, thanks for a little overtime with us. In hour two, Bill Doleman going to be with us, NBC Sports, Pride of Fairbury, the professor. In the 5 o'clock hour, Brady Oltmans, also from Hail Varsity. More hoops and some spring ball with Jacob Padilla of Hail Varsity as we continue.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
A few more minutes, Jacob Padilla with us. Talk some hoops and some spring football. Catch Jacob's podcast with Jacob Bigelow the Nebraska Shoot-Around Pod. Good get and chat with Sam Griesel, and that's on the Hurrdat family podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Check that out, Jacob. That was a fun chat with Sammy G. What are you prognosticating for Nebraska? Some names that have either visited or thinking about visiting Nebraska. I know Fred's got to fill some voids with that roster. You've got Carissa out of Arizona, the point guard that made a visit. You've got Brady Dunlap, a really talented wing that was all in on Notre Dame, but is looking at Nebraska. Hunter Dickinson's in the portal now from Michigan. Any insight as to where Fred may go to shore up the lineup?
Yeah, not a ton. Again, the visits are the more telling than the initial contact. You're going to see Nebraska's name tossed out a ton because they're casting a wide net to try to see, all right, which of these kids are interested in what Nebraska has to sell. And you won't know that without reaching out in the first place. So going to see their names connected with a lot. I don't know how many of them they're going to be in it for. Obviously, again, getting Carissa on campus to spend a few days here, that's a big move. Like those are the ones that you're going to be wanting to watch out for. Is all right, who is interested enough to come take a visit, and where else do they visit? How many visits do they take? It's always kind of tough reading the tea leaves with recruiting, but transfers. I mean, a lot of these guys have they know what they want when they enter the portal. They have a good idea of, okay, what am I looking for? So a lot of times those recruitments will go a little bit quicker. They'll hone in on, all right, who offers what I'm looking for, and then see kind of what those teams have to offer when they look a little bit closer. So I think we'll probably start to see Nebraska getting more involved with getting guys on campus and getting multiple meetings with guys. But I think we're just kind of at that point now where that's really starting to heat up now with the Final Four. Obviously, that's kind of a busy time in the college coaching world. And as we kind of progress here into the off season, we'll see season's over for everybody. Now, all these exit interviews have taken place. Now, we saw the kind of like the last week or two, a bunch of names entering the portal. Obviously, again, more today with Dickinson, obviously the biggest name. But we'll continue to see names, I think, hitting the portal, and we'll continue to see Nebraska attached to a lot of names. It's just a matter of, all right, who can they get on campus? And Carissa, I think they're looking for a point guard. Obviously, losing Sam Griesel, Carissa would fit that need. But they've got some other spots to fill as well. So I think they can kind of cast a wide net and try to find, all right, who's the most talented player that fits what we're trying to do and also is interested in the things that we have to offer.
Jacob, last thought here on Husker basketball before we go Final Four, and I got to ask about Kisei Tominaga. Any idea on the timetable that we could be looking at here? Is I'm sure there's probably some pre-draft processes he's going through right now. Do you have any inclination of when that announcement could be forthcoming, whether or not he's going to return for his final season?
Well, we've got a couple of weeks. I'm trying to think when exactly. I know the early entry deadline, I believe, is in April. Okay. So we've got a couple of weeks here So within the next couple of weeks, we'll at least know what he's going to be doing from that standpoint. I think I think it seems like it's optimism a little bit higher that they'll be able to keep him than maybe the feeling was at the end of the season. So that would certainly be a good sign. Like if you can bring him back to continue with what he did at the end of last season, that would be huge for this team that is losing two of its three leading scorers. But yeah, I think we'll see within the next 2 weeks if he wants to put his name into the draft here, get some workouts, get some feedback, and then kind of take that and go from there. And I know Trev Alberts was on his kind of monthly show or whatever, and talked about how Nebraska is continually kind of looking at the NIL landscape and how international students are affected and what they're able to do, and trying to come up with creative solutions to give opportunities for Nebraska's international students. And K-State would obviously be one impacted by that, depending on kind of what they come up with and what they can find that fits with what the existing laws are.
Who's playing Monday night? Who do you got for the final?
Probably UConn. I mean, you look at UConn is really the only team that kind of fits the profile of teams that win the national title almost every single year. Obviously, they're number one in Kent Bomb, but top 20, top 25 or so in both offense, defense. They're third in offense, 11th in defense. The other three teams are kind of more. Florida Atlantic is balanced. They're top 30 in both, but they're not elite in either one. And Miami and San Diego State are both kind of slanted one way or the other. Obviously, San Diego State's elite defensively and not great offensively, and Miami's the opposite. They're elite offensively, not great defensively. So ultimately, I'm sticking with UConn. I think they're their best team left. So see them kind of advancing beyond Miami. Although Jordan Hawkins, he's a big piece for them. When they're at their best, it's that dude's rain and fire. And when they struggle offensively, he's a big part of it, whether not hitting shots or whatever it may be. So for their sake, hopefully he feels better than he's feeling today. But on the other side, I guess I'll go with Florida Atlantic to keep this thing rolling. Again, they're a well-balanced team. They're 24th in offense, 30th in defense. They've got some size. They've obviously got some dynamic guard play with Davis. They've got all the pieces to keep this thing rolling here. So I guess UConn over Florida Atlantic is probably my pick out of what we've got.
Just
left.
How you drew it up, right? You're just too reserved to show that winning bracket to everybody.
Although I did finish second in the it looks like, because I think nobody can gain any points left in the Hurrdat bracket pool. I did finish second there.
What does that get you? Steak knives?
I don't think that anything in that. Although I also finished second in my money pool somehow. So I'm in first right now, but one of the two people behind me is going to be right, because one has Miami, one has UConn winning this game. So one's going to jump ahead of me, the other's going to stay behind. I'm going to finish in the money in my bracket pool there. So, yeah, let me be 100% clear. That is not saying that my bracket is good. It was just less trash than everybody else. It was very bad.
So, Jacob, you say UConn versus whoever, San Diego State, yeah. FAU. That's what your head's telling you. But what does your heart tell you? Last thought, 30 seconds in terms of what would be the most fun stylistic matchup for a national championship game.
I don't know about stylistic, but just you said heart. Let's get a Gorka national championship. Let's just take the Aztecs to go all the way. Go Omaha.
Love that.
Yeah, that's straight up good stuff from Jacob Padilla. Jacob, we'll check in with you next week, man. Thanks for a few minutes today.
Sounds good.
All right, there he is. Yeah, I know Jacob was like, let's get a rope a title, man. That's pretty good.
It begs an interesting question. Maybe I'll do some research during the commercial break. When was the last time a Nebraskan won the NCAA tournament in basketball?
I think there's been 4 or 5 Nebraskans that have played in the Final Four.
I'll do some research.
We'll wind down Hour 1. Hail Varsity continues.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time at Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Schmidt and Elijah Herbel. You can check the podcast out, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. For the audio, for the video, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel, Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter at HVarsity Radio. And MJ Sherman on our mind. Good time with him yesterday, and some of his comments with Nebraska, specifically why he chose. We touched on it with Jacob. And, let's hear from MJ himself on the Big Red, his new home.
There's no concrete answer on why Nebraska, but I understood that Nebraska is a team that's fighting to make another impact on the college football world, and I feel like I have the skills and everything about me that can help this team do that. You know what I mean? So Coach Rule got a dream, I got a dream as well. So I always want to win games and have an impact on this team as much as the college football world.
So that dream, generational wealth, but he wants to win, wants to be a part of it, wants to go bowling, and More from MJ Sherman here on what really got him here was the coaching staff, and specifically Matt Rule.
But I do like Coach Knightley. Tell him I love him, man. You know, the scary part about leaving Georgia was, like, would I ever find a coaching staff like that again? And that's what I found right here. You know what I mean? Like, especially from them stemming down from the NFL, coming in here, Coach Rule bringing almost his entire staff here too. I mean, that's always been a blessing. And me and Coach Rob, we developed a bond to the point where, yeah, man, like, he's my coach, and I'm proud to say that. So
you had Sherman touch on his time at Georgia and what he was leaving, and what that championship culture is all about down there in Athens.
I got $1 million friends. You know what I mean? So, like, I mean, yeah, that too. But, like, yeah, I got $1 million friends. And then what I mean by that is, like, I've seen a lot of guys that I call my brother to this day that they grind and work hard in my position or other positions similar to mine to be where they at now, right now. So, like, just watching them, learning from them, asking them questions, doing stuff like that. The same thing I do here. When I feel like I did a play and I can run over to the side, like, hey, did you watch it? Did you see it? What's something you critique me on? Same thing I did over there with my big bros here, but I guess now I'm the bigger brother.
So the thought to me is this: can you get high level talent to grind, like not low level talent, but like less talented players that have to put the work in just to be part of the discussion, and you mesh those where you get talent and that ability to grind and get it and be coachable, good things can happen. Hence the projections here for Nebraska to be back in the top 25 in short order.
Well, and it's that combination of talent and, as you mentioned, the ability to grind, but, like, there's a difference between grinding, and it's that same conversation that we had earlier this week with, well, hard work beats talent when talent fails to work hard. And what Nebraska needs from their talent is to not work hard compared to the rest of the guys in the team. They need to work hard compared to the rest of the guys around the country. Mm-hmm. Like, you need your talent working as hard as they've got them down at Georgia working, or at Ohio State working, or at Alabama working. And MJ Sherman's been there. He's done that. He knows that level, and he knows the type of work that gets put in by those Georgia defensive guys that end up going and playing in the NFL. And as he said, becoming $1 million guys. He gets that, and he can be that presence that can kind of show the rest of the team, you know?
A lot of versatility with his athleticism on this defense for Coach White. Bill Doleman on the way, hour 2 coming up.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you, it's hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Pride of Fairbury is back in. Bill Doleman, NBC Sports, the professor. Billy D, where are you coming to us from?
I don't like to reveal that. I'm on the lam, and I'm trying to maintain a low profile. So I like to keep that kind of private so that nobody knows my whereabouts.
It does not look like a roadside hotel where you can hide Marcus Dupree, I'll say that.
Now, can you confirm or deny reports that you are currently with Chief Solich and you're on the run as he evades bail?
I can neither confirm nor deny, but it sounds like a hell of a lot of fun.
If we hear a toilet flush, we know he's hiding somebody. At Bill Doleman on Twitter's where you find him. Bill, been a really interesting week, not just with spring football, but also Trev Albert's announcement with Frank Solich coming back to Nebraska for the spring game. You worked a lot of years with Frank. What a start there today, and get your reaction to Frank's return and just the process that this has taken to get him to come back.
You know, I think it kind of closes a chapter on Trev's tenure as the athletic director. I think when he took the job, that probably wasn't the number one public priority that he had, but I bet that it's something that he thought, this is one of the main things that I really, really want to do and that needs to be done for Husker fans and maybe for the state of Nebraska, given how much the football program and the athletic department means to the state and how much, people love Frank Solich around the state. A guy from, the Pennsylvania, Ohio area who came here and made Nebraska his home and devoted so much of his life as a loyal lieutenant to Tom Osborne. People love Frank. He represented, really the Bob Devaney program. He was a fullback. He was 5'9", if that, 5'5", 5'6". So he represented the Devaney era and that work ethic. And I think Trev probably had it in his mind over however many years that this has to be righted. And then when he got the job, I think really that may have been something that he penciled in, put it in his wallet and said, I want to get this done. I don't think this is a gimmick in any sense of the word. I think this is genuine. And I think that, I think 20,000 more Nebraska fans will be at the spring game because they want to be a part of it. And I think Trev was right when he approached Frank with that, with that angle that, look, this isn't about you. This is about Nebraskans. And as much as he spent his life the last 16 or so years in Ohio, I think people still view Frank Solich as one of ours. And I'm sure that there's something pretty special where Frank's name will be on Memorial Stadium forever. I think that's probably the next part of the story.
Are you suggesting that they rename that brand new, beautiful athletic training facility after Frank Solich? Is there any inside knowledge here you're trying to allude to us here?
No. I think, there are some legends who have their names, around the building. And I think, Frank is every bit as much of a legend. And, kind of like Tom Novak. I don't think you're talking about, retiring a number. But, Tom Novak was, a cornerstone player for Nebraska football back when, the program was just another college football program in the mid-century. And I think Frank represents that. And I think there's got to be a way to make sure that people remember, his contributions to Nebraska football beyond just one great Saturday afternoon in the spring.
Bill Doleman with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Bill, with Frank and what he's meant, and a guy that's been pretty much anti-spotlight, that's just not his style. And for Trev to broach it like he did about it being for the fans and for the state, that's right on. But Matt Rule's role, let's go there. And, of course, you have Trev, you have Coach Osborne, and then there's Rule that's been reaching out, and he's been talking to all the folks he needs to talk to about what will work, what won't work, and why, and how do you go about this thing? What's your thoughts on the path Coach Rule's taken here?
It's just another right step. I think I say every week when we talk about Matt Rule's performance that he just continues to make all the right moves, say pretty much all the right things. He has endeared himself to Nebraska and our culture, our people, and not just Nebraska athletics. And keep in mind, too, Matt Rule went to, is from State College, Pennsylvania. He knows that part of the country. So I'm sure that there's a language that he and Frank, though generations apart, they speak. So when Matt Rule reaches out to Frank Solich, is two guys from the neighborhood talking about Ohio, Pennsylvania type football things. They share Nebraska football. They share a reverence, I believe, for Tom Osborne. And so I think when Matt Rule makes those gestures to Frank Solich, to Tom Osborne, to high school coaches around the state, I think it's with a genuine understanding that it's important to do that to establish a recruiting base, but to restore relationships and make sure that there are strong bonds to the past. And I credit Matt Rule for doing that. And like I said, it's just another right step along the path to where we are, 4 months after he was hired for the job.
It's Bill Doleman with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Bill, as we get into spring practice here, it's been ramped up, and we've gotten the media circus that is going to follow Nebraska football during the spring cycle. I just want to get your take on what this spring can be for Husker football. We've gotten the message from the coaching staff that, you know what, it's not about the results in the fall right now. It's not about the depth chart. It's about the journey and getting these guys developed in the right way. I don't get your reaction to that and just how crucial this spring is going to be for Matt Rhule getting his first season at Nebraska started in the right way. And obviously the spring is always a crucial time, but this one feels extra important.
I think one of the things that's made this spring so interesting is the personality of the coaching staff. And, Nebraska's media staff, the guys in charge of all the videos, they've done an incredible job of, dropping those 31-minute, 3-minute. There's a 7-minute video on Garrett McGuire. Mm-hmm. I think they've done an incredible job of introducing Nebraska fans to the coaching staff and getting an idea of what that personality probably is like behind the scenes. I'm sure a little bit of it's for show. But what I mean by that is I think we've got an idea that this Nebraska football team, I think, is enjoying the journey and the prospects that things are going to get better sooner rather than later, that they enjoy the staff, they enjoy each other. They enjoy the freshness, the newness, and all of the opportunities that are being afforded to them. I think the gray shirt thing is an interesting twist that we all learned about this week, and that I think kind of represents that fresh start that some of those guys have. That, yeah, you might be A.J. Rollins, a promising tight end, but we think that you've got a bright future maybe along the defensive line here at Nebraska, maybe beyond Nebraska. And there's just something about that, listening to Rhule talk about it, that there's such a newness of opportunity and I think hope that those players are being given, that they're getting a legitimate chance to prove themselves to these guys. The players have bought in. They believe what they're being told. And therefore, I think there's a really positive tone being set for the spring. Now, as we all know, in this era of college football, there might be a significant roster turnover after the spring game. We saw that last year. The entire defensive line was basically redone after spring. But I think for the most part, I think people have been given a glimpse of what the personality of this staff is, and that's reflecting in the players' attitudes going into the next 2 weeks of spring football.
Bill, a thought here. We started the show off talking about top 25 in 2025, and Nebraska's one of the, it's one of the teams circled that could be at that level by then. Is that satisfactory to you? Or if you're gonna predict here or project, do you think Nebraska could be better sooner with this staff? I mean, what's your timeline like with the investment that's been made, the track record that's been proven at other stops for Rhule, and the difference in starting point here, presumably with Nebraska versus the other spots?
Well, this isn't Temple and this isn't Baylor. This is Nebraska. There are players within the system. And the guy wrote that 24, Nebraska will be a top 25 program. And I think when Dylan Raiola, after he transfers to Nebraska from Georgia for the 25 season, that's going to give Nebraska a lot of promise to perhaps be a top 15 team in 2025, if that's how we're going to start looking at things in crystal balls 2 and 3 years from now, right? I mean, right now we're looking at the crystal ball that Dylan Raiola 2 weeks ago is going to Nebraska. Today or yesterday in 24/7, he's going to Georgia. And I'm sure the transfer portal will be around, and maybe the crystal ball will be that in 2 years, that's what is going to happen with the roster turnover, and he'll be the Husker quarterback for 2025. Look, there are a couple of things about that poll that I thought were somewhat interesting, given the fact that, Colorado was a spot ahead of Nebraska in 25. Do we even know what conference Colorado is going to be in 2024, let alone 2025? If they're in the Pac-12, which will be a glorified Mountain West with Oregon State and Washington State and
don't forget
San
Fresno.
Diego State.
You got to beat Fresno to win 25? The Pac-12.
What?
I said they're going to have to beat Fresno State to win the Pac-12.
Or they're going to have to go beat Utah in the Big 12. Mm-hmm. And Kansas State and Lance Leipold and Mike Gundy and all that. If Colorado goes back to the Big 12, where most people in Colorado still think they are, by the way. If they go back to the Big 12, the competition level for them is going to go sky high. If they're going to be in the glorified Mountain West in the what will ever be of the Pac-12, right? the competition level is not going to be that great. There's not going to be a lot of respect for them being a playoff contender. A couple other things, though. Texas, they had them in the top 5. They're going to the SEC. You think Texas is going to be a top 5 program against SEC competition? Oklahoma's 18. They're going there. Texas A&M's in the top 25. The SEC is about to get a whole lot tougher. UCLA was not even listed. Did anybody notice that? Chip Kelly, they're not in the top 25. Wisconsin's supposed to jump up to the top 10 in 2 years. Michigan's going to fall out of the top 10. They just got a 5-star quarterback yesterday. And Florida at number 21. So we don't even know what the poll is going to be next fall. And we all know by now that the polls don't mean anything until they start gathering together in conference rooms in October. But nevertheless, Nebraska will be in the top 25 this year. How about that?
See, and Bill, you actually said something pretty interesting that I want to get your take on. There was a story in The Athletic earlier this week about recruiting pipelines, and you mentioned the fact that Wisconsin was listed in the top 15 of that as people kind of hop on that train of Luke Fickell and what he could do with Wisconsin. But there's something interesting to note with the Badgers, and that's that in this past year, they've gotten away from their traditional recruiting pipelines of Wisconsin. And I want to make sure I have the number right here so I don't get it wrong. Yeah, in 2023, Wisconsin had one total in-state player, which is their lowest total since 2019, and also it would be the lowest total since Nebraska joined the Big Ten of them recruiting in-state. And I want to get your take on that because Nebraska, that kind of was part of their downfall this century as well, the fact that they got away from the recruiting pipeline of recruiting Midwest kids the 500-mile radius.
Yeah, and they didn't pay attention to Nebraska, and they lost, some players from this state, and Matt Rule and company are having to clean that up. And if that's the case with Wisconsin, if there have been some recruiting ties to high school coaches in that state that have been broken or forgotten about, you're going to start seeing schools like Nebraska sweep into Wisconsin, just like all these schools are doing in Nebraska now, going to Omaha and Ainsworth and Sydney and wherever to go, try to get on the radar with, quarterbacks out of Gretna because Nebraska didn't pay attention to great talent in their own backyard, in its own backyard. If Wisconsin is doing the same thing, you're going to look for a lot of schools like Nebraska to go get some big hogs up there and bring them down and say, we're going to run the ball. What was the comment about Nebraska football that Corcoran said over the week, that Nebraska is fast, simple, and powerful, right? And Nebraska is going to have a fullback. Well, maybe you got to go find some big offensive linemen. And if Wisconsin's not developing relationships or maintaining them, then why not Nebraska or some of the other schools in the Big Ten?
Bill, quickly, your preference if your main goal is to keep all in-state talent in-state, and we can just say your 1A, 1B is Nebraska, and then 500-mile radius. What's your second choice? It's going to be Texas and Rule with his connections. Do you like honing in on Texas as kind of your alternative hub for players? Do you like California? Do you like Texas? Do you like Florida? Do you like Georgia, Jersey? Where would you go? Because I think Nebraska is going to hit Pennsylvania. They're going to keep going after Jersey, and they're going to plant a flag in Texas on top of that 500-mile radius Nebraska emphasis.
I think the answer to that is yes, 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 and yes. But it's clear that Matt Rule is going to tap into those high school contacts that he made down in the state of Texas. Good Lord, they just put a couple of flights in from Lincoln to Dallas. You think that's by accident?
Well, think about it too. You can go play bongo drums with McConaughey too. I mean, Austin's on that.
I think it's Nebraska, and you got the 500-mile radius, and I think you look at that 500-mile radius and you say that stretches down to Houston. Right, you map that out in pencil. 500 miles goes from the Canadian border to getting kids in North Dakota down to Texas. You're going to be fighting with SEC schools for Texas talent. With Texas and Oklahoma going into the SEC, they're going to start saying, look, you can come here and play in the conference. There's only going to be 2 power conferences, and not everybody can go to Texas and whatnot. So why not tap into that while you can?
Bill, enjoy your weekend. We'll talk soon, partner.
All right. Go Big Red. See you guys.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Good stuff from Bill Doleman. Get the podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. We say hi to Brady Oltmans HailVarsity.com and magazine at Brady Oltmans on Twitter's where you find him. Reminder to get buckled up. Use your seatbelt. It saves lives. Prevents injuries only if properly worn. Buckle up. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. Brady, you hunkered down. What's on tap this weekend, man? Great work. Awesome job with the recruiting coverage last weekend. Can you take a breath, or do you still got things working, things to report on this weekend? Big scrimmage tomorrow.
Yeah, I guess that's my way of taking a breath, is just having to step in and do a little post-scrimmage coverage. I think that's the plan still. There was kind of maybe a plan of us getting to see a little bit of the scrimmage. I don't think that that's going to happen, but we'll still have post-practice kind of coverage from that. And Sunday will be the new installment of the kind of Huskers preparing for the NFL kind of thing. Once every Sunday morning, between Pro Day and the NFL Draft, we'll have one story on a former Husker going to the draft. So awesome. Have something on Caleb Tanner for this weekend for people to enjoy.
Now, Brady, I've been trying to figure this out with trying to get some intel on what's going down with Nebraska, and you mentioned trying to find a way to go watch the scrimmage. Can you see the practice field with binoculars from the Capitol? Is that possible?
I think it's a parking garage, my friend.
Yeah. If you want to go to the Capitol, I think you got to squint real hard.
That's why you get the binoculars.
I think you just rent a helicopter, don't we? Don't we just rent a helicopter tomorrow?
I think at that point, let's pass the collection plate around and see which one of us has to fly that thing. But it's
not it.
I don't know. I'd be curious to see what they look like now at that scrimmage. But also, I guess it was a couple days ago. It was really nice day out here. So I took the dog out over to campus and we walked around. He got all the attention he could have dreamed of, and that's how I kind of rationalized it with myself. But we walked around, and obviously out of curiosity, you kind of walk by and see the progress on that new facility, and you look at kind of the practice field and everything. So I don't know, you can hear the whistles. You can't really see much around the construction site and everything like that, but there's a football practice going on.
Well, it reminds me of that. You remember that student reporter at Oklahoma a couple years ago that they found a spot on campus that they could get the overarching view of Oklahoma, and they were the first to break the news that Caleb Williams was going to be the starting quarterback following that Texas debacle with Rattler. They broke the news, and the whole Oklahoma staff was just irate about it.
I think Brady, Archie's a good enough pup. I can't do this with mine. And don't give my wife any ideas because they may run away and never come home, and she'd be good with that. But if you dropped a leash on old Archie, he'd find his way back to you, but you can just wander in. I'm looking for my dog. You can train him to go scout out practice. They aren't going to shut the door on Archie, I wouldn't think.
No, and trust me, he would scream and yell until he got his way. So I'd say like, oh yeah, if you find him, you can keep him, and then they, after 5 minutes, their eardrums would be bleeding, and they'd want to give him back anyway. So.
That's pretty good. Let's spend a minute here on Dylan Raiola. Latest national recruiting projection this week is now Georgia. That's where his official visit is scheduled for in June. Are you thinking June or July here for this timeline? Do you think it's sewn up? What's your feel or read with Raiola here? Do you think Georgia's pulled ahead?
Well, it's interesting because they had a couple of visits lined up for April. The Oregon visit on the 29th for their spring game. He was planning, or at least initially had planned, to visit Nebraska spring game the week before. It seems like those might be in jeopardy just because of scheduling purposes. And I think that gives the Raiola family, Dylan specifically, a chance to kind of take a pause. He did all the visits, March and even part of February. He was traveling around, going to all the schools and everything. And I think it just kind of gives a good pause, just to give take a beat, see, how you're feeling about things. If you don't visit any of the schools and you're just sticking at home for a couple of weeks, what are your feelings? What stands out to you? What are you, most anxious about? What are you most excited about? And obviously, Georgia, not only being the two-time defending national champions, but they were the first school to offer him. And they've been in this hunt with him for a long time. So I think he locks in the visit there. I would imagine that that's not going to be the last visit he takes. I would imagine another round of visits into June. And then that pushes the decision into, you would think, July, maybe even possibly early August, which for this coaching staff, for Nebraska specifically, might push it a little bit later than they want to, but they've made it clear that they're all in on Dylan Raiola. He's the only high school quarterback that they really want. I mean, after Danny Kaline committed to Missouri, they're all in on Dylan, and then they got quarterbacks they like in recruiting classes beyond that. But right now, that's the guy that they want, and they're going to stick it out and ride it for as long as it takes.
Brady, a quarterback of Dylan Raiola's caliber obviously could change the fortunes of Nebraska, but not really all that important if you can't protect him in the pocket and develop a running game for him. And Nebraska trying to do just that. I saw today Brandon Baker out of Mater Dei out in California, one of the top offensive linemen in the country. He's planning a return visit back to Nebraska following his unofficial last week. He's going to be in town for the spring game. I want to get your reaction to Brandon Baker and Nebraska clearly making an impression on him.
Yeah, it's interesting because he was one of the guys that, you see the top-rated offensive tackle in the country is coming to Nebraska, your ears perk up like, oh, what's this now? And then it's tough to get California kids to really commit to Nebraska steadily, especially with a new coaching class or a new coaching staff, I should say. They have a little bit more NFL ties, but how do you build that familial bond between guys and coaches that fast? And he really just seemed to get it. From everything that I've heard about him, from his impressions on the place, he really responded well. I think he likes the pedigree that Nebraska has for offensive linemen. I know that there's some people that might scoff and think about last year, but the Remington and the Outland Trophy awards and ceremonies are both held and distributed within here in Nebraska and Lincoln and Omaha. And you've got Dominique Raiola, you've got Dave Remington, you've got very prominent offensive linemen from Nebraska. And I think that really appealed to him. And then that helped it kind of stand out. And I wonder if that coaching staff's kind of message to him of saying, hey, we have a long history of developing offensive linemen at the University of Nebraska. You could be part of that. I think that really stood out to him. Still, it's going to be tough to get away from Oregon. His older brother played there. So that's going to be a tough hurdle to climb. But with him wanting to come back for another visit and see the spring game and see Husker fans respond to Husker football, let's be honest, that's probably going to make a strong impression on him too.
Brady, this weekend, from a recruiting standpoint, what's on Nebraska's radar? They could, and it sounds like they may have some more in-state kids stopping by to check out things.
Yeah, they've got a couple of in-state kids. Caleb Pye from Omaha Central is kind of the lead attention grabber out of that. But Tanner Hollinger, I believe, is one of them from Cross County. And they've been getting, in fairness, it's not just like another big recruiting weekend. They've had recruits just come in, just open door policy to just come in. I think Matt Rule actually calls it like a open program policy or open practice policy where guys can just come in and see if it's for them or not. I know that don't press me on the names, but I know that they've had kids from Blair and elsewhere in the state already this week kind of come by and just, poke their head through the doors, meet the staff, kind of see what it's about, because Rule and this coaching staff really wants to have that open door policy for players to come to them and see, hey, is this a potential for them? And then to the point where you get kids that see it, they want to be a part of it, and then they work hard even if they don't have an offer yet. And then it's almost like, to a certain extent, like a reverse recruiting of how we know it. Sometimes the players come to you in certain cases like that. Obviously, the big 5-star, 4-stars, you're going to have to go out and get. But I also think that this is a good way of, if you've got in-state kids who are aspirational to play at Nebraska, they see the standard, and that's going to make them work hard if they want to get a preferred walk-on or even try to work their way up to a scholarship, in the early signing period. And
I can say with certainty from my own experience, I played middle school football with Patrick Pelini. We got to go check out practice once, if not a couple times a year. And seeing the level at which these college guys attack practice and how they handle themselves at practice, it was pretty eye-opening for me as a middle schooler, realizing what it takes to go reach that level. And I always look back on those practices we went and saw as, I don't want to say being foundational in my football career, but it was just such an eye-opening experience. And I'm glad that high school players in the state get to go see what the standard of a place like Nebraska is and should be as their own personal guidance, even if they don't plan on going to Nebraska in the long run. But Brady, while we're talking in-state kids here, I need to get a report on Carter Nelson. He was in town, I believe, last weekend, and I saw just yesterday he picked up an offer from Florida, so his recruitment is still hot and heavy. And I wanted to know if you gotten anything back about Carter Nelson's visit last week, what his impressions were, and what kind of just impact the staff made on him during his time in Lincoln.
Well, he really likes it. He and his family, they are Nebraskans. That obviously that wasn't his first visit to Lincoln, but being in that environment and being around all of those recruits, I think kind of left him feeling like I could be a part of something here. Like, this is it's an exciting thing to be a small town, 8-man football Nebraskan, to play at Nebraska, to see some of the best players in the country remotely consider it just the same. Is kind of exciting. I know he got along pretty well with a couple of the other guys. I want to say Grant Bricks and he seemed to be having a lot of fun when they were hanging out at the baseball and softball games last week as a part of that visit. But he's also, crying out loud, he's getting offers from all over the place, and he is the kind of talent that you really need to lock down now. If you've got an in-state kid, especially from small town Nebraska, and you want to lock down in-state recruiting, you got to somehow keep Georgias and the Floridas and the Alabamas away. You got to lock down that scholarship and that commitment. And anytime you're competing with a school for a kid like that, it's going to be tough. But I do think that Carter Nelson, he really likes Nebraska. He also likes other schools, like Notre Dame came to visit him. He's obviously keeping his options open, but I think the Nebraska ties still mean a great deal to him.
Brady Oltmans with us from HailVarsity.com and magazine. Get your subscription now, digital and print. HailVarsity.com/offer. And Coach Rule's talked about wanting to win now. And it's funny to look at some of the news out there with top 25 projections. We hit on it with Doleman. We talked about it in hour one. Year one, too soon to have a top 25 expectation, Brady? About 30 seconds.
I don't know. To me, it really depends on the time. Their schedule falls in line where you could have Nebraska be maybe 2-2 or 3-1, somewhere around that area, and then they hit like a 4-game win streak, and then obviously a top 25 ranking definitely falls in the realm of possibility there. I think Nebraska's in a better position now than any of the year one rule projects that he's inherited before. But it's also just going to be really interesting to see what they do and how they pick up that ball and run with it.
Brady, we'll check in this weekend, bud. Thanks for jumping on with us today, man.
No problem, guys. Anytime.
See ya. There he is, Brady Oltmans. And if you see a corgi at practice, you know whose it belongs to. Danny Burke's on the way from Wiesen.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Danny Burke's with us shortly here from Wiesen. Weekend Outlook here with the Final Four. Dwayne's checked in. Dwayne, thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Yes, Smitty, I was just wondering, we talk about keeping all the kids in football in the 500-mile radius, especially the state of Nebraska. How can Trev Alberts praise our basketball coach? And I think this is his fourth year recruiting, and we can't keep one. He hasn't recruited one high school kid out of Nebraska in 4 years.
I don't think
he has recruited one.
He's recruited them. I don't think he's got them. It's not like he hasn't.
He ain't got any of them.
No, he hasn't recruited. He hasn't won those recruiting battles. He's gotten.
We've had a lot of good kids leave the state.
Absolutely.
But I never hear about him keeping our in-state kids here. I just don't understand that.
Well, it's been brought up lots of times. How many? Well, we have. When you look at Chucky and Hunter and all those guys doing pretty big things.
Gonzaga.
Yeah, no, we've talked about it, and Nebraska's just not a destination spot for some of the top state in talent because of where the program's been. Now, you can right some of those wrongs.
Well, then why do we keep the coach?
Well,
I just don't understand it. But I appreciate your time.
Yep.
Well,
okay, thank you.
I think the question is with where Husker basketball is right now, could a different coach do better in recruiting? And you have to get the wins first, I think, before some of that top talent can stick around for you. But it's a situation. But he does bring up a good point, though. That's got to be a crucial plan for Nebraska basketball, but the wins have to come first.
They do. And listen, it's easy to say, well, sure, go get in-state talent, but none of the in-state kids want to come here because they're going 5-20. And to his point, why do you keep the coach? Well, the coach has made an adjustment, and it's win next year. And at least you got a transfer back in from Lincoln, and you do have your son that's a walk-on that had some great moments. So, yeah, it's a different Fred now with his outlook and how they're going about it than when he came in.
But I agree with Dwayne that getting in-state talent has to be a huge part of being a Husker basketball coach. And I think two things can be true. One, Fred has to do better at getting in-state talent, but B, you have to look at it and say, well, if you put yourself in the shoes of these kids, Nebraska just isn't at a level where they can compete on a national recruiting scale with the Gonzagas of the world, the Virginias of the world, even with Creighton with in-state kids. Creighton's been there and done that. They've shown it.
Creighton's killed it. They've been great. They've gotten the top 2 or 3 in-state kids, period.
And it's going to start with winning your basketball games and being at a point where local kids can say, you know what, Nebraska is the next best step for me in my basketball career.
And, Timmy Miles was working to get Hunter. Timmy Miles was working to get Chucky. Donovan Williams. So, yeah, I mean, Tim wanted to go in-state here. And I think Fred came in with what worked for him in the past. It obviously didn't work his second time around in college, and now he's shifted it. And he is trying to get in-state kids. But right now it's been a air quote good year, and you're 16-16 because they play defense now, because they play together now 4 years later. Dwayne's question's not wrong, and why do we keep the coach? I think we all like Fred, and we want to see him do well, and maybe this year's a step in the right direction for next year. They got to replace a lot, though.
Yeah.
Danny Burke with us from Wiesen. Danny, you walked into Husker basketball talk. I'm sure you're glad you hung on the line. How are you?
I'm good, guys. I'm good. I understand the frustrations, as you both very well know, but hey, we've got some big boy basketball to look forward to this weekend. Hopefully, the Huskers one day, FAU, San Diego State, proving that it could be possible, that it can be possible. So, I'm looking forward to this weekend, though, guys. How are you guys doing?
We're good. Danny Burke with Wiesen Sports Network at Danny Burke 5, the Danny Burke podcast. Lay it on me here. What do you like, either line-wise, totals-wise, or even prop, if there is some floating out there for the Final Four, Danny?
Have not looked at the props just yet. I'll probably wait to see if these lines kind of settle down a little bit more so tomorrow. But I think it's going to be a big indicator as well, reading the lines for the first game with San Diego State and Florida Atlantic, because right now you pretty much see San Diego State minus 2.5. This line did briefly touch 3. Now, San Diego State did open at about minus 1.5. I thought this game, because this one just completely just had me like, wow, I clearly I had it at a pick 'em, so it could go either way. And the market has given a little bit more confidence into the Aztecs. And again, like I said, they went up to as high as 3. Now it's settled at 2.5. And I guess you're looking at these stats, you're going, all right, where are the big advantages that lie with San Diego State? Because offensively, I mean, all year and at the start of March, I mean, they're 272nd in effective field goal percentage offensively compared to Florida Atlantic, who is 79th in the nation. Defensively, that's where San Diego State hangs their hat on. We know this. We saw this on display in their last game against Creighton. And if the refs allow these kids to play, much like they did, except for that final shot, granted, I mean, technically it was a foul, but the argument is, you let them play all game and then you make a call like that. We don't need to go into it, but the point is, if they let them play like that all game, I do think San Diego State has the advantage, and I get why they're a small favorite here. But we can't ignore that Florida Atlantic isn't just what their seed says they are. No, they've been a dominant team all year. Their record indicated that, 35-3, and they have some scores on their squad. They just rely on the three-point shot so much that because of how good this San Diego State defense is and how they prohibit their opponents from having success from 3 the past month, they're only allowing opponents to shoot 22% beyond the arc. If Florida Atlantic can't get those threes to go in, where are they going to get their offensive success? Because as much as San Diego State has struggled offensively this month, they have picked it up themselves. And if they're going to have Florida Atlantic miss these long shots, all right, you grab the rebound, you push it quick, San Diego State could thrive on transition, and they could thrive from the free throw line potentially. So I think I do lean where the market's going, and I think that is a big indicator of who the right side is, even more so than other games. I'm probably going to reside with San Diego State. I haven't done anything yet. Again, I want to see, furthermore, where this line ends up at, but I got to lean with the Aztecs in that game. And then, fellas, for the other spot with UConn and Miami, it's pretty simple for me here. I mean, first of all, there's no way I'd bet an under in this game. It's really high, so I lean over, but you didn't get the best number. It's as high as 150. I do see some 149s, but I'm probably not going to go chasing that. I mean, it's clear that UConn's the best team in the country right now. I think everybody agrees on that. In Miami, I've been high on it. Look, I think I joked with you guys, made like 5 brackets. I think in one of them I had them going past Houston at least, but I didn't really expect them to come back and overcome Texas in that game. But, man, the pedigree of this Hurricanes team just lights out offensively. They never say die. I think this is going to be the end of their road in their great story. UConn is just too deep. They're so efficient on both sides of the ball. I'm not one for looking to lay in that middle spot of 5, 5.5. We see 5.5s really painted across the board. So much like some of my other strategies are for betting basketball, such a volatile sport, I'm going to wait to see if I get a better in-game number with UConn. I mean, Miami's a great enough team offensively to get out to an early lead, to keep it close, to give me a better line on UConn, who will eventually prosper through because of the tenacity they pose on the defensive side and how consistent they can be offensively. So, again, waiting for a better number on UConn. I think they'll win, but Miami's probably going to make it scary for a little bit, as they have in every single game. So that's going to be my approach to the second game of the evening.
Danny, hang on with us. We need some baseball futures on the other side, okay?
You got it, guys.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, it's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel will wind down this Friday edition tomorrow, 7:30, weekend edition, streamed for you, Hail Varsity YouTube and Hail Varsity Radio Twitter. Danny Burke back with us, VSiN Sports Network at Danny Burke 5. Danny, how you feeling about the Major League season? I know you celebrated your national holiday, probably at Wrigley, with opening day yesterday, but have you put some futures down for MLB 2023?
Yeah, first and foremost, did make my way out to the friendly confines for opening day, so something I've been wanting to do, and officially pulled the trigger this past week. And look, I'd be lying if I said there weren't a few bets on the Cubs in 3 different ways. So, the ticket paid for itself. Thankful to the Northsiders there coming through with a nice victory to start off their campaign this year against the Brewers. And look, that does coincide with a futures bet that I did place. And one of the 2 that I've made, was the Milwaukee Brewers under 85.5 wins at -115. Look, this Brewers team for the past several years, in terms of when they've been somewhat contenders, they've had great pitching. Nobody's denying that. What they've lacked is offense. And once Yelich fell off, they really couldn't find it anywhere else consistently. Their pitching was good enough, again, to limit their opponents, and when they were getting wins, it'd be like 2-1, 3-1, 3-2, something like that. Well, you shipped off a key piece with Hader in your bullpen, and that didn't sit well in the clubhouse. Again, Yelich has not been great. You lost some other key pieces. What do you have there besides Corbin Burns and some other good pitchers? Really nothing. And you're not going to be able to beat up as much on your NL Central opponents because, 1, they decrease the amount of times you're going to see them in a regular season, and 2, the Cubs are going to be better this year than they were last year. The Cardinals are the best team in the division. The Pirates will be sneaky competitive with O'Neal Cruz and some of the young guys they got coming up. The Reds are going to be terrible, so that's where you'll get your dubs. But the Brewers are really going to fall back this year. So I thought 85.5 was overzealous on this Brewers team. Still just kind of a name brand recognition from the past few seasons and the pitchers and their starting rotation they possess. They've got no offense, guys. So I went under 85.5. And then the other bet that I did make, and it didn't necessarily pan out in game 1, but very early. I had Logan Webb 33-1 to win NL Cy Young. Now, again, when I make these long futures bets, and I beat the dead horse with this, but it's not me necessarily saying I guarantee he's going to win. I have full confidence he's going to win. No, it's more me saying that I think he has a really good shot at winning it, and the fact that his price was at 33-1 there's no way in my mind, if he performs the way I expect him to, that he's going to be in the range of 33-1 come July, come August, come September. I think he should be in the range of 10-1. I think he can be a top 3 pitcher in the National League. Maybe I'm being a little bit high on Logan Webb, but in terms of this Giants team, he's clearly the ace now. The Giants are going to regress a little bit themselves. They need kind of that shining light to where if they're really struggling all year, what's the one game you can look forward to? Well, it should be when Logan Webb is your starter. The thing that held him back last year is his numbers do get worse on the road, so if he can help that out, not only because he just struggled on the road, but because it's a pitcher's-friendly park in San Francisco, I think he can be a really solid pitcher in the National League, and again, at least get to the point where his odds are going to be decreased a lot, and maybe I get a cash-out opportunity with these books, or if I'm lucky enough, further along to hedge off. But that's the only bet that I've made right now, because those are the 2 bets that I saw where I was like, all right, I really want to get in on it now in case I miss the boat. Otherwise, guys, as you know, 162 games, such a long season. These regulated books update and offer futures bets continuously. You can just get a better idea of it as the season progresses and then make your case at that point. And even if you miss it by a couple bucks, so what? At least you get a better idea of it. And at the end of the day, money's still green. So that's what I'm going to be looking to do for some of these other futures bets.
Danny, awesome stuff. We'll check in next week. Thanks for the insight today, bud.
Yeah, you got it, fellas. Enjoy your weekend.
All right, good stuff from Danny Burke. Back at you tomorrow morning at 7:30. Thanks.